Okay, today we're going over the second class on compression. Previous class, we went over the majority of the topics, explaining compression for dynamic control, compression as a tone shaping tool, and we started on compression on individual instruments. We, we just started with kick and how it affects the relationship with bass. Now we're going to move over to bass, compressing bass and how it affects the relationship with the kick. And then we'll move on during this mix, adding other rhythm elements and moving on. Um, the other topic that I didn't quite get into last class was EQing before or after compression. I've talked about that topic already in the EQ lecture. I prefer to do both. There are some things I EQ before compression. I tend to do more subtractive EQing during before compression, so I can remove um, all the extra frequencies, the noise, whatever could be taking clarity away from that instrument, pulling that out of the picture so that the compression doesn't pull it up and make it even more obvious that there's a problem with that instrument or is clashing. Um, Post compression, then I might do more additive EQing, maybe some harmonic EQing. Um, I might do some harmonic EQing pre-compression. Just depends how I want the compressor to react. Remember, anything that we are boosting with EQ before the compression, we are making that compressor more sensitive, more aware of those frequencies that you're boosting within that instrument. If you are using a compressor on a kick drum and you're putting a sidechain compressor at 100 hertz, then you're putting an EQ before the compressor and you're giving it a little bit of a tight bell curve peak at 60 or 40 hertz, you should be okay because the sidechain is avoiding the compressor from being um, uh, over analyzing the low end of the kick. It's going to take care of everything more that's 100 and above. So that is something to keep in mind, and then we'll jump into today with sidechain, where sidechain is a really important part in shaping, in tonal shaping with a compressor, because you're telling the compressor what you need to focus on, what range you need to compress. Not that it doesn't compress everything, but what does happen is it reacts to the instrument in different ranges. Okay, give me one quick second here. Okay, hopefully the dogs won't keep barking now. Okay, then we'll probably have enough time to start the conversation on parallel compression. There are two videos here. Um, I'm gonna try to show the Vance Paul one. Watch this other one. Um, it gives you two different points of view on it, and then I'm gonna try. And next class, we're gonna get into multi-bus compression, mix bus and multi-bus compression, and that gets into Michael Brauer's technique and stuff. Now, let's we have all the topics discussed there. Sidechain compression. Okay, let us move to bass. Everything's here. Everything's correct. Give me a thumbs up to make sure that you're hearing this. Okay, perfect. So this is where we left off. We have compression setting 5, which is a little more on the aggressive side. 4-1, medium attack, medium slow release, medium fast release, sorry, with a high pass. Okay. On bass, setting number 1, I have an attack of 50. An attack of 50 I would consider a medium fast attack. And a release of 100, I would kind of consider that a medium fast release also. This is all ranges, and this also kind of depends on your choice and what your norms are. But notice I am starting on 2-1, which, as I've mentioned in the previous class, lower ratios, 2.5 to 1, 2 to 1, 1.5 to 1, tend to help preserve the low end dynamics better and help expand that low end. If you go into faster ratios, you kind of feel it affect the lower subfrequencies a little bit more when you're dealing with individual tracks. Now, we are presenting here two elements that we didn't have before with the distressor. One, we have a knee. And two, we have an actual adjustments flexibility to the side chain. We can put a high pass filter and a low pass filter. High cut, low cut filter on the side chain. So, what is the knee of a compressor?
Sure. It's, I think that is where basically how much before the actual threshold does the compression actually start to gradually start to take place. Keyword being gradually, because it's kind of does a thing like that. I'm trying.
That's about right. So then, a soft knee is what, and a hard knee is what, based on your explanation.
Hard knee would be basically no. It doesn't start before the threshold, or
No
it's
gradient.
just, yeah, it's just a hard angle, whereas soft knee would be, it is very gradual and more sloped, and yeah, sloped is the right word.
Sloped, curved, maybe.
Curved is a better word.
Okay. Everybody agree with that definition? Somebody else wants to add something to it? No? Okay. That's pretty good description. Let me just expand on it a little bit, and the proceed tends to help with that. Here is your knee. A hard knee gives you a perfect mathematical calculation. That means that at a threshold of 18, ratio of 4-1 will be applied. For every 4 decibels that exceed the threshold, 1 decibel will be spit out. Okay, and it'll happen exactly at 18 negative 18 dB threshold level. Full on 4-1 will get applied. Obviously, this how soon it'll happen is based on the attack, and how soon it'll stop the compression is based on the release. But the full force of the compressor is applied immediately at the threshold. When we get into softer knee, we are changing the reaction curve. So notice if we do a really soft curve, let me make this a little bit bigger. You have hard knee, and we're really changing that slope. So that means that according to what FabFilter considers a slope of, let's leave it at 40, we're about negative 25, and negative 25, you will start seeing some amount of compression happening. Let's call it 1.2 to 1. And then the closer you get to the threshold, that ratio keeps getting higher. Then you got 1.5 to 1, 2 to 1, 2.5 to 1, 3 to 1, 3.5 to 1. But it doesn't stop at the threshold point. It doesn't immediately then suddenly kick to 4 to 1. No, that gradual curve continues above the threshold, and until it gets to the point where that slope changes. Let me see if you can see that. No. Yeah, you can see a little bit of it there. Then at some point, that slope will be a full on 4 to 1. What is the advantage from you guys' understanding and point of view of using a hard knee? And what is the advantage of using a soft knee, and where would you use each?
Um, all I can really confidently contribute is that isn't a really soft knee effectively like an opto compressor ish.
I won't go down that path.
Okie dokie. I have nothing else to contribute then.
All right, because an opto compressor, I I I do get what you mean by that. Um, but I don't want to blur that line, and I want to stick a little more to a textbook definition that way, because an opto circuit, the definition is in the name. It's literally a light bulb, or a light emitting a diode that will flash on and off. Um, Actually, it's not an LED. It is some sort of light bulb circuit in it, where when you turn on a incandescent light bulb, there's not an immediate response. It fades into full brightness, and when you turn off the light bulb, it you'll see it that there's an immediately a drain of energy that'll be like maybe half of its potency, and then it slowly drains out to nothing. That is what is the characteristics of an optocompressor. There is a optical circuit that is reading how much light is emitted by that light bulb, and when the signal goes through, it makes that light bulb brighter, and how quick or slow it responds becomes its attack and release.
Okay.
Okay?
That is I'm thank you for that explanation of opto compressors because that every time before someone has explained it to me, they've made it sound like the attack and release is based off of like basically the speed of light. And I'm like, the speed of light is really fast. So, and the attack and release of an optical compressor is characteristically slow. So, you pointing out that it's because of the speed of the light emitting diode or whatever it is
And not an
dimming.
not an
I,
LED.
I'm for lack of a better word,
Yeah.
whatever it is, but like it dimming and like the process of it gradually dimming is that's what causes the attack and release.
It's the simplest thing of you're using technology, existing technology, and you're just forcing that to you're forcing the compressor to respond to that, at this point, antiquated technology of the incandescent light bulb. The characteristics of how quick it gets to full potency or not, um, and how quickly it releases, is that characteristic curve. So the opto circuitry that was developed for the LA2As, 3As, and 4As became the expected sound for an opto circuit. It tends to be a little slower in the attack, and it really tends to be slow on the release. Um, then you have pendulum audio, which they designed the fastest opto circuit uh, in the industry, and that type of circuit was so responsive that you could actually control the attack and release with a little more. Um, I would say you could control it with a little more ease and get results that you felt, yeah, that sounds about right. Um, and you could use it for mixing and mastering on a full mix bus, and it's not gonna just pump or over compress or just kind of give the sluggish withheld sound that you would get from a typical vintage optic compressor. Okay, so getting back on topic. Anybody have any suggestions where a hard knee would be best used? And just look at the screen for a minute. What type of instruments would benefit from you putting a set threshold and immediately you get that reaction?
Probably drum, like kick drum, or
Perfect. Because it's a quick transient.
that's I was gonna say the knee has something to do with transients.
And it does and it doesn't. I mean, it's not that the soft knee won't respond to transients. It won't respond to a transient with the same intensity as a hard knee, right? Uh, and not to confuse things, but one of my favorite compressors, the LE22, which I've mentioned here before and have shown here before, has a RMS to peak knob, which I can make it pay attention more to the peak or to RMS, which in a way you can say it's making it react more like a hard knee or a soft knee. And I don't tend to like it full peak. I will start at full peak and then just work my way down until I feel that it is compressing enough. And it is a way for you to say some of these softer nuance hits that I feel I just need a little tone shaping and control. The softer part of the knee will allow that to be manipulated, but the rest of the full force will happen on the stronger hits. But Madeline's correct. I tend to use hard knees on high transient instruments. Sorry, I said Madeline. Madison. Apologize. Um, okay, so because of that transient response, and normally when you're processing drums, you're trying to achieve a certain average level for every kick and snare, some consistency, and you're also trying to use that as a way of let me just not let the drums get any louder than this, especially when they're just doing a normal kick snare hit on a groove and then they slam it on a fill. You're trying to maintain a little bit of that average, right? If you do a slow, a soft knee, you might be grabbing a little too much. That the hi hat bleeding into the snare will affect the release if you have a soft knee, right? So all these little things you need to keep in mind. Now, where would you guys use a soft knee?
Bass.
Probably, yeah. Why?
Uh, for the sole reason that I usually put an LA2A on bass.
Any more explanation to it than that, or just it just sounds good?
It's more, it's less, uh, it's less noticeable, less obvious,
Okay.
more gradual.
So it doesn't bite as much. It's a little more just put it,
Yeah,
holds it in place, and leaves it in place.
yeah, it's a lot more of a just it'll reduce the dynamic range without affecting without being as obvious, I guess.
Okay. Good enough reason. Soft knees, um, soft knees, you tend to relate to special vocal compression. Why? You're on a verse. from word to word, syllable to syllable, line to line, there might be significant changes in the dynamic range of a singer. And you don't necessarily want to have to set the threshold so low that the softer lines on a verse are compressed very hardly, very harshly, just to make sure everything else stays kind of in place, right? So if you have a hard knee and you want the softer parts to be compressed, you're having to lower the threshold a lot so those softer parts fall within that threshold and get shaped by the compression. You're probably over compressing everything else about that verse. But if you have a soft knee, now those soft passages are being gently shaped by that compressor, and then you're allowing the much louder phrases, words, syllables of that verse to be really contained, because those have too much of a dynamic range above from the rest. And then now you can do a more smooth, more transparent compression to a vocal, and it can benefit the entirety of the performance, can benefit from that tonal control that you get and tonal shaping you get from the compressor. Bass is good also. Majority of the bass doesn't have a high transient element unless you're slapping. Um, if you're doing if you're doing bass with a pick and you're really going for that trebly tone, now you're dialing up some quicker transients, so you might want to figure out somewhere in the middle, maybe a little closer to hard knee, fast tempos. It's easy enough for now for you to just transition from a softer knee to a harder knee, so you can control that bass on those faster tempos, and it works better in that way. And if now you're the next song or the next section of the song, you're playing half notes and it's a bridge and it's halftime, you can just change now the knee to a softer knee, and it now normalizes and holds those notes. So every time you pluck those notes and those half notes, it just evens them out a little better. Okay, is that making sense? All right, let's jump into the actual examples. So we are starting with a knee of 6. This is on the harder side, versus a knee of 30 is the softest knee that it does right there. Okay, and let's listen to the bass isolated. Is this the drum bus? Yes. And see what we can hear. How obvious was that?
Not super.
Uh, Nick, you're a little low in volume, but I think you said the transients.
The transient and the tone were a lot clearer.
Okay. What range in the tone? The lower range, mid range, high range?
Kind of like the low mid.
Okay. Patrick, you were saying, sorry?
Oh, you just you asked how obvious it was, and I was just saying that it wasn't super obvious.
Like I did with the kick, I'm starting with something a little more on the smoother side, just some gentle tone shaping and containing there. I'm not doing any aggressive compression if you look at the gain reduction. So if we continue on the whole theory of frequency, of identifying the frequencies that you want to process, and you setting the attack and the release based on that frequency range. Where are we with an attack of 50 and a release of 100? Bass guitar doesn't really have much above 3K. So I'm kind of setting it a little maybe slower than I would on some other things. So I'm trying to let the top end there, let a lot of the top end of the bass go through, and start to affect a little more of that mid range on the bass to pull it forward. We're going back into the discussion of where should the bass and the kick sit height wise? Do I want the bass above the kick, or do I want the kick above the bass? So we've kind of decided, or I've decided, on version setting 5 on the kick, which pushed the kick a little on the low side, but I kind of left it with some top end there because I felt I needed some aggressiveness. So if you hear the kick and the bass without the compression, the kick is overpowering that bass at this point, but I really like how it drives. So now let's figure out where it should fit. Now I'm gonna bypass. I'm gonna put the bass compression on and off. What are you guys hearing?
The attack is definitely brought up more. It's evened out, which brings it sort of on top of or at the same level as the kick.
The full range of the bass, or a certain frequency range of the bass, is now on top or in front of the kick.
I'd say like the mid or high mids ish.
So I brought up some of the attack of that kick with the compression, but now the entire dynamic range of the kick is overpowering the bass. With this setting, I'm trying to let the almost like the plucking of the bass just sit in front of the kick just slightly. I don't need that much click from the kick. It can be the same or just slightly more coming out of the bass. Everybody agree with that? Okay. Hopefully, as we go through all these settings and stuff, it'll be easier for you to pay attention and focus on what the differences are. Okay. So now, setting 2, we are going from 50 and 100 attack and release to 47 and 285 in release. Pretty drastic change. What else is changing? Obviously, the threshold and the gain reduction and the makeup gain are adjusted according to the settings.
Your knee.
What's happening to the knee? Is it softer or harder?
Softer.
Correct. 0 is hard, 30 is soft. Let's listen to this. Okay. What's different now that the release is 3 times longer?
It sounds a lot fuller.
Why, Nick? Based on last class explanation on frequencies.
Um, you're letting more of the low frequencies through by, or some.
Through, we haven't changed the attack.
You're right. So compressing more of the high end then, or I don't know.
Nick, do you have an idea?
No, I mean that's really all I noticed about it.
Okay, no problem. Why does increasing the release times 3 affect more of the bass? Remember, it's about wavelengths. High frequencies have shorter wavelengths, so pretty much any amount of release will affect them drastically, but a shorter release will affect very minuscule amount of low end and sub range because the wavelengths are so wide. So now if we triple the release time, we're allowing more wave cycles of the low end to fall within that release parameter. So you're hearing more dynamic change happening on those lower frequencies.
Okay, and so when you said that an opto compressor has a characteristically very slow release, that would
That's why you like it on bass.
okay.
Is that making sense now?
Yes, I just
All
made
right.
that connection.
So I know when I started this last class, some of you were like, oh, it sort of makes sense. I'm not sure how it ties in. I tried to show some of that stuff with a kick, but since a kick doesn't have much decay, it's a little harder to hear how much it affects the low end. Now that we have a bass guitar and it's all about the low end, now we're really going to hear how much the release affects the low end. So then let me put kick and bass, bypass it on and off, and then I'll stop, and then I'll leave the compressor on and I'll switch between setting 1 and setting 2. Here we go. Okay. What are you guys hearing on those two examples? Go ahead, Madison.
I don't know, because before it sounded like the one with the longer release sounded fuller without the kick. But when you're going back and forth just now, I'm pretty sure that it was opposite. That the one with the faster release, the bass sounded fuller with the kick, and the one with the slower, the longer release sounded snappier with the kick.
Interesting. Could that be because the settings that we have on the kick are affecting the low end of the kick so it competes more? So let's go to the kick and let's go to that kind of snappier setting of 4 where we're removing the high pass. We're removing the high pass on the side chain, so we're affecting the low end of the kick more. And let's see what happens. I'm going to start on setting 1 on the bass. How about now, Madison?
Um, I'm not 100% right now. I think I need to hear it again.
Repeat that again. It wasn't clear?
I think I need to hear it again.
Okay. Is it easy enough for you guys to see me changing the settings on the compressor?
You know, it's actually kind of not. The screen's kind of flickering whenever you play something, and I can't really tell when you're clicking. Like I can kind of tell because like the knee moves and the settings will change a little bit. But
Yeah. It was easier for me to do that on the. Okay, so I'll make it more obvious. I'm gonna go here, and I'm gonna just change it up here. Does that work?
okay, yeah, that should be all right.
Here we go. Is that helpful, guys?
Yeah.
So, what's the prognosis now?
2 is muddier. The bass is muddier than 1.
So it's almost like my release went a little too far, and I was trying to pull out a lot of low end, but the release is so long that it could be kind of going into the low end of the next note and the next note and the next note, right? Okay, let's move to setting 3. Setting 2, setting 3. What's changing? Look at the pretty lights. High pass. I have now added a high pass on the side chain at 666. That was just pure coincidence. There you go. Somebody had to. So let's listen to the side chain. Does everybody understand what a side chain listen is?
Yes.
Okay. This little speaker here allows you to hear what the side chain is listening, what you're feeding into the side chain. So whatever filtering, notch, peak, whatever you're doing, you're listening to it before it goes into the side chain. So now I can decide how much of whatever frequency range. In this case, contrary to Madison's observation that the bass was muddy, I decided to continue punishing the low end, trying to look for something. Maybe this is not the direction, but let's just see where it takes us. So here's the side chain. Sounds like it's underwater, right? There's nothing above 666. This is how the bass sounds. So what am I doing? I'm not letting the compressor see the only range of the bass that has some fast transients, that 1K to 3K range. Because they're high frequencies, they're going to have a quicker reaction. I don't want the compressor to react to that high transient range. I'm just going to let it focus on this mid to mid low bass range. Let's see what happens. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to turn on and off the bass, and then I'm going to turn on and then I'm going to add the drums, and I'm going to turn on and off the compressor. How's that sounding now? More muddy, less muddy?
Less muddy.
Why though? I didn't change the release.
I don't know. It's more glued together.
If I'm trying to control the low end, high frequency transients are going to get in my way of affecting low end transients. Does that make sense? Again, wavelengths, these move more cycles quicker, have a higher, quicker peak. Those peaks are going to drive the compressor mad if they're as loud as the low end frequencies. Okay, so then now I'm trying to hone in what the compressor really needs to pay attention to. The body of the bass, where I want the bass to sit and stay there, is really 600 hertz and below. This is what I want held, controlled, and pushed forward, not so much the top end. So now, same thing that we did with the previous settings. I'm going to switch between setting 2 and setting 3. The only difference again was the high pass filter on the side chain. I'll keep the kick where it is. Starting on 3. What's happening now to the top end of the kick when I switch from 2 to 3? Nick?
We got the high pass on 3 turned on. So I don't know, like the higher end frequencies on the bass were like coming through a little bit more on 2 and not so much on 3.
I'm hearing that the other way around. I'm hearing that when you listen to the kick, just the snappiness of the kick between take 2 and 3. On 2, the compressor is overreacting to the top end of the bass, so it's reducing that high frequency range of the bass, right? Containing it. But when I go to setting 3, now the compressor is not paying attention to that frequency range, 1K to 3K, where the kick snap is. So now the top end of the bass is forward and on equal terms with the snappiness of the kick. Let's do that one more time. Again, part of the critical listening is not always listening to the instrument that you're trying to process, but listening to all the other instruments that are interacting with that instrument that you're trying to compress and seeing how everything else is affected around that bass. Just pay attention to the snappiness of the top of the kick. And I hear what you're saying, Nick, but it's almost like in that other example we did last class with the kick, that as I changed the compression, the kick almost changed in tonality, in pitch. It went from a higher pitch to a lower pitch. That snappiness is also sort of changing in pitch on the kick, but I'm not changing the compression of the kick anymore. I'm changing the compression of the bass. But the fact that you're hearing different frequencies get past the dynamic range of the bass is manipulating the tonal aspect of the kick. Remember when we were going over the EQ class, you have the harmonic scale, and as you raise and lower the different harmonics of those within that note, you're hearing the tone of the instrument change. With frequency masking, that's what's happening. I'm changing the envelope of the bass to allow more or less of those upper harmonics of the kick snap get through. So you're hearing a possible brighter, thinner snappiness to a larger scale of upper frequencies get through the bass, and that's changing the tonality of the kick, even though I'm affecting the bass. Is that making sense to everybody? How you describe that in words and interpret it, that's all subjective, but this is the goal of what I'm trying to do. Okay, changing from 2 to 4. 2 to 4. What's changing, guys?
Threshold, and then you have a low pass filter instead of a high.
Perfect. So I wasn't convinced by my direction, possibly because I was hearing the same thing you were hearing, Madison. So let me try it the other way around. Let me see how it affects the kick and interaction with the kick, right? So now let's listen to just the bass sidechain. At 185, I'm killing the fundamental, killing the second harmonic. So the bass is just doesn't sound full at all. So low mid, mid, high mid, all that is what the compressor is seeing. What do you think is going to be the difference when the compressor doesn't see the first two harmonics on that instrument? There's no sub and there's no bass.
Gonna lose low end.
Okay. Anybody else want to throw their opinion in the hat?
The low end will end up responding to the transient information of the high end exclusively, so it might end up with like some like a pumping aspect almost.
Interesting. Cool. I like those two options. Let's go with that. Again, bass by itself, and then I'll add the kick. I don't really hear pumping. What do you guys hear?
Definitely sounded like, again, like fuller with the compressor on.
Did it tilt to one direction or the other, Nick? Did it sound thicker? Did it sound brighter? Mid range? Can you
Like the
describe it?
low end sounded thicker.
How's that slap snap interaction with the kick and the bass now?
Well, they kind of sit a little bit better together.
I think so. Anybody else differ in that opinion or want to add something else? Is that what you expected it to happen?
Um, no, I didn't know it was gonna happen.
Okay. Anybody else? Is that, did you hear what you expect that would happen?
Not really. I kind of thought it would be a little muddier.
Okay. Let's switch quickly between version 3 and version 4. So we're basically going from a high pass uh, roll off to a low pass roll off.
I feel like, sorry, go ahead. I feel like I am kind of hearing, like, I don't want to call it pumping, but like a bit, it is like a delayed reaction almost when you have the high pass filter on versus the low pass filter, where it is like you can almost hear it like ooh, ooh, kind of, I don't know.
When the high pass is on, you feel that it reacts slower
Yeah,
than when the high.
yeah.
That makes sense. Anybody else?
It's the bass has more clarity in like the mid range on version 4 with the low pass.
But why? That's the opposite of what you thought.
I know.
Okay, how about this? Um, 3, making the compressor focus on the low end. So the envelope of the response to the compression is shaped by the low end energy. Longer wavelengths, that delayed reaction that Patrick is mentioning is because it's reacting to longer wavelengths. It takes longer for those waves to develop. That reaction time is going to be different. When we're switching to the high pass, to the low roll off, there's no subfrequencies that are being affected, or no subfrequencies that are triggering the sidechain. So it can respond to a quicker transient instrument. It now thinks that this bass guitar is really more like an electric guitar because there's no low end forcing the envelope on the bass to change. So you're actually hearing a weaker low end because the low end isn't, it's not that it's not getting compressed, is that the low end isn't shaping the envelope of the compressor to its benefit. The mid-range and high frequencies are now shaping the envelope of the compressor to their benefit. Is that a little easier to understand that way? The frequencies that you feed into the side chain will shape the envelope to their benefit. So it almost sounds like the mid-range and the clarity of the bass went up, and it's almost more consistent. Note by note, it's more consistent. But it doesn't have that weight to it, right? You kind of miss that fullness of I really want that the bass to have the bottom. But because of the melody, that weight kind of gave it a little too of a muddiness. Okay? Let's go back to the kick having that setting 5 that I liked, because I want a little more low end of the kick. There briefly you can hear that the setting that I really wanted on the kick, setting 5, that was a little more mid forward, but it still added some gut punch to the kick. Now with this new direction of filtering the low end, I'm allowing that separation and height movement to happen better. It's not really working to have the low end to make the bass be the bottom. Let the kick do that, and let the bass be more of a moving melody. Let that rhythm of and bounce and accents that the bass player made, that should not be squandered. It should be enhanced. Okay, let's not assume that the bass always has to have the bottom. So I ended up doing setting 4, and I kind of liked it that way. One more thing I might try is both. That's not changing it that much. It's very, very slight. If I wanted to have that focus a little better, I would probably tweak that a little bit more in that range. But I think the real benefit is not letting the sub drive the envelope in the compressor here. Okay, hopefully with these two examples, you get an idea of the importance of sidechain and how that drives and defines the function of the compressor. And you've gotten an idea on how much we can affect the low end or the mid-range or the top end just by attack and release. We had 2 different settings on the compressor for attack and release. The other settings, all we did was sidechain, and look how much of a change happened with the bass. Okay, let's go to the next instrument. I'll try to get through these a little quicker so we get through everything for this class. Here's the guitar. Let me add snare. I do have a compressor on snare. And oh, right, I was mastering, so it needs to be on latch. Kick. Let me add the overhead here. I do have a compressor on the snare, but let me move on to the other instruments and then see how much time I have, and I'll go back to going over snare compression. Here's the guitar. And I want... Here's the verse. Let's listen to this by itself.
cannot hear you.
Yeah. Hmm. There we go. So the guitar is following that same rhythmic motif, right? And then when we have the bass and the guitar together, it's easy for to have the bass just overpower that guitar. The guitar sounds good by itself. Let's start shaping that guitar so it can sit a little bit better, and let's emphasize what we need to emphasize on that guitar. We've already EQ'd it, which is what we did on the previous class. Now we're going to mess with the guitars. Let me start with setting 1. Here we are, a knee of 7, an attack of 60, a release of 120, ratio is 2.5 to 1, nothing in the side chain. Let's hear what happens. What are you hearing changing in that guitar performance? And mind you, I'm really trying to tailor this compression to emphasizing notes and rhythms in this guitar. Is that obvious or not too obvious?
I think it sounds different. I think that you can tell that the guitar goes right on top of the bass. And like the mid range, the clarity is brought out a little bit more in the guitar.
Any particular parts of that rhythm, of the guitar rhythm, that are emphasized more than others?
Yeah, the attacking part, like the accented note. Yeah.
Perfect. That's exactly what I was going for. That's the little ostinato that he's doing there within his rhythm part, where he's changing the chords, but that note just stays there, and I kind of want that there, at least on this setting. If that compression is not there, every time the snare hits on those accents, the snare overpowers that note. I didn't initially like that. I kind of wanted that to kind of sit where it needed to sit there, and almost force that dynamic to go up at the same time. So as he hits that guitar note, that note ostinato goes up in dynamic range with the impact of the snare. I'm exaggerating that rhythmic accent. focusing the listener to make sure that part of the rhythm stays there. Okay, setting 2. This looks pretty drastic. Attack 60, release 120. Attack 11, release 335, 336. What's going to happen here?
You're gonna kill the transients a bit.
Just a little bit, all right? Just a little bit. That's why it wasn't working. The VCA wasn't set to the drum bus. It kept bugging me why it wasn't that working correctly. All right.
So
Is that what you expected?
ish. So I have like 2 notes. One that it seems like is a lot more clear. Like the sustain of the notes and everything has been brought up a lot. But it has also almost turned it from less of it's like I feel like it has kind of gotten rid of some of the transient information, and it's made it more of a how we talked about like the different kind like the different instrument groups like pads. It turned it into a pad almost versus
Yes.
yeah.
I've eliminated the accent. I decided maybe I don't need the accent. But I want the picking of every part to come through. Before it was you just heard the accent, but this is the main rhythm part for the verse. The other guitar part that we'll add in a minute, that's the auxiliary guitar. It's supposed to complement this one. So the fact that I was accenting those and everything else just seemed to take a step back, I kind of felt maybe that's not the right approach. Here, it's barely touching the transient of those soft notes, but those accents, it's squishing those down. And then I'm bringing up the gain and adjusting the threshold. And like you pointed out, the longer release is giving me more sustain. Why do I want more sustain? Going back to the psychoacoustics of things. If you want an instrument to stay in your perspective, if you want it to be you want the listener to be more aware of it, you add a longer decay versus you add verb, or you compress and you add that extra release to pull those notes out. I'm making it that pad, but I'm not killing completely the transients of every note, just of those accents. Making sense? Setting 3. 2, 3. 2, 3. Softer knee. Attack is even faster from 11 to 7. And release is staying the same, but now the ratio goes from 2.5 to 1 to 15 to 1. So I'm now limiting this sucker. Let's hear what happens. What's different, and is that again what you expected?
Not quite what I expected. Um, it's like a lot of the tone's been almost sucked out of it.
Now it's really, you do hear the pumping. You hear that pumping, but you hear it in a very particular range. Because the attack is so quick, I am forcing the plucking to be pushed forward, and then the compression hits, stretches out, elongates every note on it. I am making sure that the softer notes have just as much decay as the accent notes, but by adjusting the combination of the attack and the knee, I'm allowing more of that intensity on the accent plucks to get through. You're hearing more of that da uh da on this time, even though it's 15-1, because of that play of soft knee and attack to let just enough of the accent to go through, because it is important, but allowing me to pull up all the individual accents of all the other notes. And this is definitely one of those settings where if this guitar was by itself, I would not use this compression. But because I'm using it against a bass line that drives and a drums that is adding to that accent, I needed to have some settings that really drove the guitar to be where it is. Everybody still following? Cool. Other rhythm guitar is here. I'm going to leave this compression setting on this guitar. And let me pull this out. Oh, I just remembered something. This is important because this will be in the class, in the exam. Notice I have two compressors on the bass bus. This is the compressor I was using to shape the bass. Here is the sidechain compression on the bass. Here's the kick sidechain. Let me mute and mute for a minute. On this compressor, I am doing a 2.6-1 really quick attack and a long release. When you are shaping the side chain for on the bass to be triggered by the kick, what you are picturing is how much of that kick are you allowing to overpower the bass for that given time. The quicker the attack, more of the snap of the kick is going to get through. The longer the release, the more low end of the bass, of the kick, is going to supersede, is going to overpower the low end of the bass. So if you want that relationship of keeping the kick snappy, put a release of 80 to 50 on the side chain. If you want a case where I kind of want the low end of the kick to dominate, like I made that decision because I want the top end of the bass to really drive the tune, then put a release of 300 and force it to dominate. And it's funny that once you kind of relieve the bass of that job of having to do the bass, fulfill the role of the bass, low end fullness of the track, give it to the kick, you do a side chain like this, and now that bass is really forward. That bass is equal in every way of the drums. Both are there gelling together, doing their role of a foundation for the band. Okay, everybody clear on that? Cool. And I mentioned this because doing sidechain bus compression is one of the things I need you guys to do in the exam, and I do want you to do this as two separate compressions. Tonal shaping, and let me pull up the rubric here quickly. I meant to do that earlier. The rubric is here. Dynamic control is use compressors to level average volumes. Use compression to push back an element in the mix, as I've been showing how I want one range or another to be pushed back. Using compression to enhance transient response to pull an element forward in the mix. This is what I just showed you on the lead guitar. I enhance the transient response of every pluck to force every note to be in your face. Okay? Tonal shaping and compression. We've kind of been going over that over and over. Compressing sidechain, manipulating the internal sidechain of the compressor, like you saw me do on the bass guitar, and using an external sidechain also, which is what I just showed you as a second compressor on the bass, and then you trigger it off the kick, and then you decide with the attack and the release how they're going to interact with each other, and make sure that they rhythmically still work well together. Don't just completely kill the attack of the bass and affect the tone severely. The sidechain, external sidechain compression on the bass triggered by the kick should be pretty transparent. When you heard me do it now and I added that external sidechain, the bass didn't sound worse. It actually sounded better. It kind of gave it a lift. It just leveled it out even more. Okay? Getting back to where we were in the conversation. And I'm going to do that. And let's listen to this guitar. listening to it with the other guitar. When I arrange guitars, I really like to make the guitarist find different voicings, especially if you're doing two different clean guitar parts, and I'm using similar rhythms, complementary rhythms, or even counterpoint rhythms. If you have both guitar parts playing the exact same block chord, you're going to have frequency masking. You're going to have issues with those two guitars fighting each other, even though you can use EQ and compression to affect that. It still all starts in the arrangement. Make the proper arrangement decisions to make your life easier when you're mixing, right? So he's playing this part, voicing it differently in the neck, but as is, how that performance was done, it has that accent. It's a light accent. It's played lightly. It's a very soft picking there that he's doing. And I kind of want to figure out how do I enhance that and I make it work with this new um, almost pumping guitar tone that I dialed up. Okay. So my first approach is Nia 4 ratio of 4.6 to 1, attack 7 milliseconds, release 30 milliseconds. What should we expect from a really fast attack and a really fast release?
Basically just cut down on the transients, and but like that's it.
Right. And there's one more feature on this setting, the sidechain. I am rolling off everything below 1K.
So is this like almost a de-esser then in a way? Like
I mean, a de-esser can act this way, but de-esser tends to be a bandpass. You have de-essers that work on shelving parameters. So you could call this a de-esser function, but again, a de-esser is just a compressor that you're affecting the sidechain. So you can make any compressor with a sidechain like this be a de-esser. If that helps you, cool. To me, it's all in the same, right? Um, like you pointed out, with a really quick attack, really quick release, I'm really focusing on the transients. I'm gonna make it concentrate on transients even more by putting a sidechain at 1K and only hearing the highest frequencies on the guitar. It's gonna ignore everything that is the body, the fullness, and the low end of the guitar, right? Let's hear what happens. what's the overall end result with that compression? Yes, it definitely killed the transients, but
It seems like there's one more clarity and more high end, which I don't understand.
somebody else? Any other observations? Doesn't it sound fuller? Why does it sound fuller?
I'm gonna go ahead and say that because you turned down the peaks, you were able to turn, like with the makeup gain, you were able to turn up the rest of it. So yeah, just basically reducing the dynamic range so that everything else sounds louder while the peaks are turned down.
Right. Remember, the part that we hear first on an electric guitar, on acoustic guitar, on a piano, on a drums, is the transient. If I'm minimizing the transient, I'm changing the envelope. If you look at, again, and I'm referring to envelope a lot, again, because of synthesis, and that helps a lot, you would see a peak. If we pull in to this guitar part, you have that peak. I am now flattening out that initial transient on that guitar. And with the gain reduction, I'm making the body, the sustain, the decay of the guitar be now louder than the transient. Transient is now playing lower than the rest of the note is happening. So it sounds fuller because there's more decay. The decay on that guitar is more present. Okay? But if I just turn the guitar up, it's going to overpower everything. It's going to overpower the drums, the other guitar, and the bass because that transient is really going to get in the way. Okay? Setting 2. Setting 1. Setting 2. Very drastic. I'm going from knee to 4 to 0. Ratio from 4.5 to 11.6. Attack from 7 to 135. Release going from 31 to 50. No side chain. I'm like, completely disregard that last compression setting. It didn't work for me. Let's do something else. I'm not even gonna postulate. Let's just hear this thing and see what happens. Anybody paying attention to the gain reduction? I'm only gain reducing the accents. why just kill the accent on that guitar? That's all they're basically achieving, right?
I am wondering how, because obviously the introduction is showing it, and it's obvious that the like accent is being killed, but that is a slow attack. So how is that killing the accent?
But that is what you're hearing, right?
Yes. I'm not arguing that that is what's happening, but it's just 135 milliseconds. That seems like it would be a pretty slow attack. Is it because there's no side chain, so the transients are longer? Or
Look at the wavelengths. Look at these waves. So you have, I am putting a knee, a quick knee, a really, really hard knee, slamming it with a high compression ratio of 11:1. That's basically limiting, right? And then I'm manipulating the attack and the release so that these two soft notes don't trigger the compression, only the accent triggers the compression. And it's a combination of lowering the threshold a lot, setting the attack the right way, and the release the right way, so that that release only really compresses the length of the accent and then gets out of the way.
so why the slow attack then?
The slower attack than the
Slow, slower, yes. So would you not consider that a slow attack?
no,
Okay.
50 is pretty quick. So 50 is basically the amount of time that this accent note takes to play out. So I'm suppressing that accent note for its entirety and then letting it go.
Oh, I meant the attack. Like why the slow attack?
Slow attack. Sorry, I thought you meant
Yeah.
release. That gets into playing around with trying to focus the compressor on and ignoring these notes and grabbing just this note. And it's you setting the ratio, the attack, and the threshold the right way until you get it to respond that way. That is just practice. Besides me saying that's just practice, that's stuff that I've messed around with, played around with over and over and over, and then I'm like, I know I can do this. Here it is. Yeah, when I was developing this class and using this session for it, um, I was forcing myself to try multiple different ways on how to compress everything for the purpose of this class. I just did one thing after the other, and I in my brain it wasn't like set this to this to that, and this to that, and you'll achieve that. In my brain, it was I need less accent, I need more sustain. I'm listening for the end result, and I'm dialing from the end result, and my brain goes to it. Take care, air drill. My brain goes to it. I just dial things up. I don't think about it anymore because I've been doing it for so long. Okay. Then when I finished with all these different results, I had to stop and take a step back, and I'm like, oh, that's why I got that result. Okay. But looking at the frequencies, at the response of those frequencies and the dynamic range of those frequencies is why you're messing around with such a low threshold attack and release. Setting 3. Setting 2. Setting 3. Attack release ratio knee stayed the same. I am now adding a side chain. I am rolling off everything below 313. Okay, let's see what that does. me take the drums out and then go back and forth between setting 2 and setting 3. Just by adding that sidechain at 300, the guitar now sounds fuller. The compression now sounds more transparent. Sounds a little more open on the top end. And now it almost sounds like that's just how the guitarist performed it. Okay? And again, that attack on that accent has more of a fundamental harmonic than the other non-accented ones. So by me forcing the compressor to not overreact to that fundamental, it kind of allows a little more of that fullness to just get through all the way. Okay? Did I confuse you with this last batch of compression settings? Are you guys okay? Vocals. I know everybody always asks about vocals. Vocals by themselves.
And where can we go from here? I know you felt it, I felt it too. Well, I think I know I do, but I need you to know it too. And where can we go from here? I know you felt it, I felt it too.
This is my clone of a U67 done by Bee's Knees in Australia. The model's called the Mahalia. It's really good recreation of a U67, and to me the U67 tends to be my favorite vocal mic. I've actually used an original vintage U67, and once I heard that, I was like, that's it. That's the sound I'm pursuing from now on. Especially on the rock stuff, pop stuff, I like it. If we're going R&B, gospel, where you want some more of that airiness to it, I'll definitely go to an Elam, maybe a C12. But U67 I like a lot. And I basically told them, get about 2 fingers from the mic and barely just say every word. Just give the voice just enough support so you can hit the note and maintain the note correctly so you can get proper pitch. But it should be a soft nuance, very intimate. And the whole performance should be this way. Let the arrangement build instead of you, the vocals, driving the track.
And where can we go from here? I know you felt it, I felt it too. Well, I think I know I do, but I need you to know it too.
So what's the problem? There are definitely longer notes, stronger notes that you're hearing out. There are softer notes, shorter passages that are just kind of getting buried. Typical what happens with the voice. There's such dynamic range in a voice that it is annoying. First compression setting, knee 7, ratio 3, attack 48, release 314. It's a long release, no sidechain.
And where can we go from here? I know you felt it, I felt it too. Well, I think I know I do, but I need
with these settings, that vocal is taking a step forward and is staying forward. It doesn't sound like it's being compressed. I really don't like uh, vocals sounding obviously compressed. Um, and I'm bringing out, stretching out the decay of every note because he's basically talking instead of talking in pitch instead of singing out. Everything is very percussive in that sense instead of legato phrasing, right? So I'm extending the decay of every note, but allowing the transience of every consonant to go through. Humans develop consonants in their frequency range what we're most sensitive to. That 1K to 5K range, that's where all our consonants fall under. Vowels are defined in that 200 to 800, 600 range. That's also where we define pitch. You define pitch with vowels, not with consonants. So understanding that will allow you to kind of figure out how you need to manipulate. Do you want to enhance clarity? Then you set a slower attack so that you're not trampling over the transients of your consonants, and then you adjust your attack so it starts working on the vowels, and you figure out how much you need to extend those vowels so you have those notes of that voice push forward and stay forward. Everybody following that? Okay, next setting. What changed? I'm just adding side chain. A side chain of 1K, of 2K on the top end, and a side chain of 230 on the low end. Let's listen to what the voice sounds like.
And where can we go from here? I know you felt it, I felt it too. Well, I think
Going by my explanation, I am making the compressor ignore all the transients of those syllables. I don't want it to react to those syllables. I want it to focus on where the body of the voice is. I also rolled off below 228 because that's the very low end. That's the chestiness in his voice, and that is the proximity effect that I forced him to have by being just 2 fingers away. I didn't want the compressor to overreact on that proximity effect that I felt was essential to that vocal tone. Okay, let's hear the results.
And where can we go from here? I know you felt it, I felt it too. And where can we go from here? I know you felt it, I felt it too. Well, I think I know I do, but I need you to know it too. And where can we go from here? I know you felt it, I felt it too. Well, I think I know I do, but I need you to know it too. And where can we go from here? I know you felt it, I felt it too. Well, I think I know I do, but I need you to know it too.
That's aiding. Now this voice sounds a little airier, a little brighter because it's not reacting to that high frequency. And it's not reacting to him. He has a little bit of a pitch bend, a glottal going into those phrases. It's not overreacting to beginning of the phrases that way. Setting 2, no, this was nothing. Right, that was nothing. So when I do vocals, again, building up on everything that we've gone to this, I really want to figure out what is that frequency range that I need the vocal to be compressed and push forward. I try to make the compressor ignore the transients because it can affect definition and clarity in the pronunciation. And I try to avoid the fundamental low end because, again, I don't want that low end to overreact, make the compressor overreact. And how low do I go on that really depends that range. If I want that voice to sound a little even more mid-range focused and almost a little thinner, I'll raise this low pass higher to maybe 350. Remember what we did on the bass guitar. When we put the bass guitar with a low end roll off at 180, it lost low end, but it gained clarity and it sat above the bass. This is the same thing that will happen with the voice. If I raise that to 350, you'll hear a little bit of a shift of where that voice is sitting.
Where can we go from here? I know you felt it, I felt it too. Well, I think I know I do.
Let me just save this here.
Where can we go from here? I know you felt it, I felt it too. Well, I think I know I do. But I need you to know it too.
Okay, and then the last thing I tend to do on vocals is I tend to double compress the vocals. Completely depends on the style and what we're doing, but I do it quite often. And I try to use one compressor first to kind of normalize all these transients, focus and concentrate the tone where I need it to be, and then help me bring up all the soft nuance on the vocals. And then I have something that could be a little more of a tone shaping colored analog compressor to hit it and finish smoothing out. The Vertigo compressor is basically a souped up hi-fi version of an SSL compressor. But what's really cool, it has the soft ratio, and that soft ratio is very basically like a variable ratio, almost like a Varimu compressor works. A Varimu compressor doesn't have a fixed ratio. It's constantly adjusting its ratio up and down as it reacts to what the signal going in. So
where can we go from here? I know you felt it, I felt it too. Well, I think I know I do, but I need you to know it too. Where can we go from here? I know you felt it, I felt it too. Well, I think I know I do, but I need you to know it too. Where can we go from here? I know you felt it, I felt it too.
and if we eliminate both compressors, let me set this up so I can do it quickly.
Where can we go from here? I know you felt it, I felt it too. Well, I think I know I do, but I need you to know it too. Where can we go from here? I know you felt it, I felt it too. Well, I think I know I do, but I need you to know it too.
Now the voice sounds full, sounds in your face. I'm adding adjusting the tone, but that's not quite everything that I will do. Now we get into parallel compression, and most people will hear parallel compression as a way to process drums. Everybody tends to parallel process drums because now you can manipulate the decay time of the drums separately from whatever else you're doing on the individual elements, right? It's a way to create excitement and maybe grit and distortion like you hear Gregory Scott do. when I'm doing parallel compressing on vocals, I tend to do that as a way of help me leverage and bring up a more consistent signal level. For me, parallel compression is a way to kind of normalize the voice, but I'm pulling up from below the non-parallel signal, the tonality and the lower passages that way. So in this case, I am using an 1176 to just smash the vocal.
And where can we go from here? I know you felt it, I felt it too.
This is definitely pumping. This is normally how I do vocals, and when I'm mixing an A, we have two 1176s. One is always on, all buttons in, and that's where I just run the vocals.
And where can we go from here? I know you felt it, I felt it too.
And the idea is
Well,
I don't care about the
think
transients, I don't care about
I
anything.
know I
I'm just
do.
gonna clobber it.
But I need
And
you
then
to know it.
the combination of both.
And where can we go from here? I know you felt it, I felt it too. Well, and where can we go from here? I know you felt it, I felt it too. Well, I think I know I do, but I need you to know it too. And where can we go from here? I know you felt it, I felt it too. Well, I think I know I do, but I need you to know it too.
So it's not it's doing something else than the other two compressors are doing. I'm making a pump. I'm making overreact. I tend to put a de-esser on the vocals first, so any type of these compression settings don't make that problem worse. But especially whichever parallel processing I'm using to the vocal, I go crazy on the de-esser, almost to the point where it can give the singer a lisp, just to make sure I'm not making things worse when I'm parallel compressing it. And then I tend to do it this way with two faders because I will automate the vocal with two faders. I like having my control console in front of me, and I'll put two fingers, and I am constantly writing more or less parallel compression, more or less dry, per section, per line, per sentence, even whatever I need. And it becomes a little bit of a play where I'm trying to make this have that I'm trying to keep the clarity and the definition and the emotion in the listener's face as all this is happening. And the next section comes in, there's more energy that needs to be required. I can just pull up the parallel compression to have that average volume stay higher, and then let the non-parallel have whatever dynamic movement it has, and it keeps that emotion the right way for me.
It's the feeling of loving someone else more than the one inside loves himself. It's knowing that the ones that you've lost are forever there, buried inside your soul. It's all in your head, but it follows like a shadow dying in the evening sun. Lay it to rest beneath the black hole graveyard, riddled with broken bones.
Now, where do I start with this? I might, depending how I'm feeling, depending on how the vocal performance is. If it is a vocal performance that I feel I need a lot of that emotion and dynamic range, especially if it's like an adult contemporary type of singer where there's a lot of technique going into it, I might end up first writing the vocal a bit and then adding the compression that I need. Or if it's something like this where there's not that much to the vocal, I just want that vocal in your face, and then I do some very slight adjustment, whether it's per section, per verse, pre-chorus, chorus, or whatever other little section that I need to work it out. Okay? One more thing with something like this, there is a concept that I learned that it is called the moving wall concept for compression. The wall is your threshold. Wall is that point where you're hearing that compression reacting. And as you're compressing a vocal, you can figure out how to move that threshold so it's constantly working, but it's working as much as you need it to work to achieve the proper dynamic control and tonal shaping. And this takes a little more effort, but I will automate the threshold and the makeup gain on a compressor on a vocal that I feel that I need that nuance. Okay, let me give you one quick example, guys, and we'll call it a day. I need to go to here is a vocal that I am constantly adjusting the threshold, the makeup gain, and I'm automating the volume of the vocal, but I'm also automating how much compression per line, per phrase I need.
When you try your best but you don't succeed, when you get what you want but not what you need, when you feel so tired but you can't sleep, stuck in reverse, and the tears come streaming down your face. When you lose something you can't replace. When you love someone but it goes to waste. Could it be worse? Lights will guide you home and ignite your bones. I will try to fix you. And high up above or down below, when too in love to let it go. But if you never try, you'll never know just what you lights will guide you home and ignite your bones. And I will
Okay. As you can hear from that vocal performance, there's a huge range on it. That's just one piece of it. This whole thing was a three-part medley there's a three-part medley of Coldplay songs. That was the last piece of that medley, and he's basically his nose is pretty much on the grill of the mic, and then he's moving away when he needs to. When he's going to build up, he has really good microphone control. So he's doing some of that dynamic change, dynamic adjustments by moving forward or closer to the microphone. He's also listening to the tone of his voice and getting closer and farther away from the microphone as he's performing to give that fullness. When he has to do those end of phrases that are soft and airy, he's getting really, really, really close to the mic so that with less, even though he's having to let more air out for that airiness, he's using the proximity effect of the microphone to give that full sound. Then when he starts the next phrase, he moves back a little bit, he has more air, and then that's constant movement. That also means I am making a whole bunch of little nuance adjustments to make sure that that stays in your face, but it still sounds natural. Okay? Let's leave it here for today. If you guys have any questions, you can email me, or we can start with all that stuff next class.
So do we have the thing due on Sunday?
No, because I believe we have one more class still.
Okay.
We still, next class, we're doing mix bus compression, processing, and then we'll go over the rubric one more time, and then we have the evaluation.
Okie dokie.
Cool? Take care, guys. Appreciate you sticking around. I know it was a little longer of a class.
No problem. Bye.
Take care. Bye.